Good morning. The House will come to order. All those in the galleries in the chamber, please rise. We'll begin our day with a prayer by Monsignor Kerwicki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let us bow our heads and pray. Our heavenly Creator, grant to us once again the assurance of your sustaining presence as we bow in this House chamber in prayer on this Ash Wednesday. Inspire us with a firmer trust in you and with a sympathetic outreach towards all the citizens of Missouri, especially the poor and the elderly. Give to each one of us the realization that your power is at work in this building, moving in the direction of justice, peace, and love among all here and in the hearts of all of our people. You are always with us. Help us to always be with you. Bless our state with your favor, and as representatives of our citizens, make us mindful of your presence and eager to do your will until our last breath. And the House says, Amen.
Please remain standing and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the approval of the House Journal for the 26th day, Tuesday, February 21st, 2023, and ask for a roll call vote.
The gentleman from Jackson has moved for the approval of the House Journal for the 26th day, Tuesday, February the 21st, 2023. Are there any additions or subtractions to the Journal? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the Journal will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no. Mr. Clerk, please ring the bell and open the board. Has everybody voted? Has everybody voted? Has everybody voted? Mr. Clerk, please close the board and tally the vote. By your vote of 137 yea, 0 nay, and 3 present, you've approved the Journal. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business will be introduction of special guests.
Introduction of special guests. Gentleman from Cape.
Mr. Speaker, to introduce some special guests.
Please proceed.
It's my distinct honor and privilege to recognize students visiting today from the Pan-Atlantic Foundation Exchange Student Program. We have many students, 9 of them today, from foreign countries that's come here to visit us. Standing to your right and to my left between the 5th and 6th columns are 3 students, and the remaining students are up here behind me on the balcony below, or behind us. And I want to talk a little bit about that. This here is unique in that we bring these students here to the United States to visit here in Missouri. 3 of these students are part of the YES program, which is a short acronym there. So after 9/11, the United States started doing some scholarship grants to bring students from foreign countries, basically from the Middle East, to get to learn about our traditions and customs and us to learn about them. I would like to recognize all these students as well as the ones up behind me here. The first one we have, and I'm going to try my best on these names here, is Faden. She is from Bahrain. I have Yasser, who is from Tunisia. I have Kajal, also known as Callie. Hopefully I'll get that right there. They're standing over here to my left. Then we have Chloe from France along with Ali. We have Amy from Thailand, John from Spain, Bianca from Spain, and Lily from Germany, along with our chaperones, Holly Littner of Jackson, Lisa Yeager of Poplar Bluff, and Tonica Tyler from Winchester. I'd like for the body to make them feel welcome. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further introductions. Gentleman from Pulaski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of special guest.
Please proceed.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, just want to make the body aware that today is Engineers Day, and I am joined here with 3 of the 5 engineers that are in our body. Of course, we're all civil engineers. And we are joined today in the upper gallery to your right by 65 other members of the ACEC who have come today to talk to us about what we do as engineers. I would love it if the body would make them feel welcome. They're right up here in the upper chamber on the right-hand side of the gallery.
Further introductions. Gentleman from Jackson.
Introduction of special guest, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All right, to my right, between columns 3 and 4, and to your left, Mr. Speaker, we have a great group from the LINK program. We have Janet Miles Barty, Sean Ackridge, and Jeff Hill. And the LINK program is a great group of a great organization that supports our children in before and after school programs. I would like for the body to give them a warm welcome.
Lady from St. Louis County, Applebaum District.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of special guests.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To your left and to my right, between the 5th and 6th columns, I would like to introduce Denny McDonough and Linda Bledsoe, his guests. They're here today to promote Peter and Paul. He is a member of the ancient Hibernians in the 1st and 2nd Division in St. Louis. I also want to point out that he is a member of the St. Louis Metropolitan St. Patrick's Day Parade, which is coming up on March 11th, and we hope to see a bunch of you there. Please make them welcome.
Gentleman from Green.
Introduction of special guest.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the distinct pleasure not only introducing someone from my district, but a former member of our body, a former Speaker Pro Tem, who is currently the Clerk of Greene County, Shane Scholler. Please make him welcome.
Welcome back, Representative. Gentleman from Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman from Pulaski forgot to introduce one of the great engineers of our state, my former mentor and our former colleague. On my right and your left, on the 6th column, is our former rep, Rocky Miller.
Welcome back, Chairman of Utilities. Lady from Carroll.
Introduction of special guests.
Please proceed.
On my right and your left in the upper gallery, stretching from the 1st to the 3rd columns, we have with us today the Missouri Association of County Clerks and Election Authorities. And I want everyone in this body to know, if you ran for election, these are the people that counted your votes with integrity and honesty. Please welcome them to our body.
Gentleman from Jasper.
Morning, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of special guests.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Scattered about the upper galleries wearing yellow scarves and yellow ties are representatives from the Show Me After School Day, representing more than 50 after-school programs across the state, with nearly 1,000 sites serving 130,000 K-12 school-age students. Missouri's after-school and summer enrichment programs support Missouri's families by providing a safe educational enrichment space while parents remain at work. Missouri ranks number 8 in overall after-school programs nationwide, according to the most recent American After 3 p.m. report. Please join me in welcoming our visitors for Show Me After School Day.
Gentleman from Morgan,
Introduction of guests.
please proceed.
Thank you. Continuing on the last gentleman's announcement about the after-school program, I would like to recognize two programs that visited my office earlier and do outstanding work. We're very blessed with some excellent, outstanding after-school programs. With us today, we have Miss Colleen Abbott and the Eldon Group and Miss Stone from the Stover Group, Morgan County R1. I'd like those to be groups to be recognized one more time.
Gentleman from Green,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To introduce special guests.
please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To your right and my left, between the second and third columns, is young Mr. Robert Clark. He's from Bolivar. He's not in my district. However, he and his family attend the congregation of the Church of Christ that I was a minister at for several years. He's a senior in high school. He's going to... We're talking him into going to Missouri State, and he's actually going to be a teacher and coach and speech and debate coach. He is a speech and debate student now and has done extraordinarily well, and he's job shadowing me today, and I'd ask that the body give him a warm welcome to the chamber.
Gentleman from Cass,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of special guest.
please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To my right and your left, between the first and second columns, is the Belton FFA, and I ask the body to make them feel welcome.
Gentleman from Clay, the birthday district,
Thank you. Introduction of special guests.
please proceed.
All right, to your right and my left, between the fourth and fifth columns, under the word honor, we have the sheriffs from the Northland area here visiting us in the house. Clay County Sheriff Will Lakin, Platte County Sheriff Mark Owen, and their undersheriffs, Lieutenant Colonel Self and Major Holland. I just ask that the body make them feel welcome.
Gentleman from Franklin, thank you for your patience.
Mr. Speaker, I would love to make an introduction today. My first is representative of District 119. I have a very distinguished guest today. Her name is Angela Gibson, and she is located underneath the charity inside of our chamber. She is our county clerk, along with Representative Marquardt. Part of the announcement I'd like today is to bring awareness to two things that she's trying to get started in our county. One is an expansion of domestic abuse center from Turning Point in Warrenton into our county. And the second is a new volunteer transportation network called Driving Hope. And you can find that on the internet on Driving Hope, Missouri. I feel like this is a very worthy endeavor, and I would appreciate the body giving her a warm welcome.
Welcome to the House. Gentleman from Callaway,
Introduction, Mr. Speaker.
please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, to your right and my left, between the first and second columns, are three students from Westminster College in Fulton. Enrique Fuentes, Hayden Torpy, and Carter Murray. I'd like everyone to give them a warm welcome. Thank you.
Lady from Cass,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of special guests.
please proceed.
On my left and your right, it's an honor and a privilege to introduce some constituents and Harrisonville School District, FFA. There is an outstanding agriculture teacher in Harrisonville, also a Mizzou grad, MIZ, along with Jason Dykoff, Natalie Koch, she's a teacher as well. Preston Baker, he is a student. Cody Cahill is a student. Summer Wagner is a student. And Joseph Ray is a student. Please give them a warm welcome.
Gentleman from Wayne,
Introduction of special guests.
please proceed.
Yes, to the rear of the chamber in the upper gallery, we have Mr. Roger Smith, the FFA instructor from the Naylor High School, the FFA group. Please stand and make them welcome.
Further introductions. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of special guest.
Please proceed.
To your left and my right, between the first and second column, I have a special guest who is also Hazelwood West High School graduate, a Mizzou graduate like me, and a fireworks retailer in St. Charles County. He's a retired teacher with the Francis Howell School District. Please welcome Tom Whalen from Augusta, Missouri. Thank you.
Further introductions. Lady from St. Louis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of special guest.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, this is a great day to be in the Missouri House. We have some illustrious people here from the Harris Stowe State University. As they are coming in right now, Mr. Speaker, they will be here advocating for Harris Stowe, thanking this body for the tremendous amount of work that we've put in and providing Harris Stowe a lot of different funding mechanisms, from police to STEM, and we have Dr. Collins Smith, who is the mother of one of our members, Kimberly Ann Collins, who is also in the building today, and we just want to give them a round of applause, and can we make the body feel them welcome? Thank you.
Further introduction. Gentleman from St. Louis.
Introduction of special guest.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Save the best for last. To my right and your left, between the fourth and fifth columns, I got some really special people here with me today. On the closer end to the column is Miss Lisa Lewis, and the next lady standing to her, as I call her, Mama Angie Brown. They're both here today from the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. Back in 2009, my good friend and Miss Angie Brown's son had committed suicide. Since then, she has made sure she's put all her energy to make sure tragedies like this that happened to her and her family does not happen again. I'm so thankful for their love and support that they've given me and other high schoolers who was friends to Adante Brown. Even though the family was going through their own tragedy at the time, Miss Angie Brown continued to wrap her arms and love around us and our family. So if the body would make them feel welcome, I would greatly appreciate it.
Further introductions. Our introduction's over. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business will be points of personal privilege, and I ask you to recognize the lady from St. Louis County, District 66.
Lady from St. Louis County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hold on, lady. Let me get some order.
Thank you. On January 3rd, 1969, William Lacey Clay Sr. made history when he was sworn in as Missouri's first black member of Congress. From that day, St. Louis and our country changed for the better. Bill Clay would make an impact on civil rights, education, and labor laws, and in the span over the 3 decades in the House of Representatives. Shaped by his services as a soldier in the U.S. Army, a labor union representative, and a prominent civil rights activist, Clay immediately took leadership role in Congress. In his second term, he was one of the 13 founding members of Congressional Black Caucus, the first formal network for African American members of Congress to focus on issues directly affecting black citizens. Clay would use his influence in the Black Caucus and the Education and Labor Committee to advocate for funding for historical black colleges, educational loans relief for impoverished black students, and for sanctions against the apartheid government in South Africa. Congressman Clay also supported the expansion of unions, negotiating rights, and a ban on the permanent replacement of workers who chose to go on strike. He received recognition from President Clinton for serving as the floor manager for a successful bill to raise the federal minimum wage in 1996, and his long-standing support for Family and Medical Leave Act. In 2001, Clay retired as the longest-serving congressman in the history of Missouri. His legacy for fighting for social justice and workers' rights will continue to be felt for generations. He truly left Congress in a better place than he found it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, lady. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Staying on points of personal privilege, I ask you to recognize the lady from Platte, District 14, for a point of personal privilege.
Lady from Platte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As many of you know, today across the state of Missouri, flags are being flown at half-staff in remembrance of Officer James Matthew Mulbauer, who lost his life last week, along with his officer, his canine officer, Champ. Officer James Matthew Mulbauer has been recognized a few times in the last week for his service and for what he gave to protect our community in Kansas City. He was my constituent, and I'm devastated of the news, of course. I'm grateful for my colleagues in this room who immediately recognized what a loss this is to our community, and rallied around support of our law enforcement community, and made sure that we were able to create a resolution for his family to recognize his service. And with your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to read that resolution to the body. Whereas it is with heavy hearts that the members of the Missouri House of Representatives pause to acknowledge the significant achievements of a life gone by, that of Officer James Matthew Mulbauer of the Kansas City Police Department, who was killed in the line of duty on February 15th, 2023. And whereas Officer Mulbauer lost his life while working alongside his beloved canine partner Champ, who was also killed in the incident. And whereas, born in Omaha, Nebraska on October 30th, 1980, Officer Mulbauer had been a member of the Kansas City Police Department for the past 20 years. And whereas Officer Mulbauer was an invaluable member of the Kansas City Police Department and will be greatly missed by his brothers and sisters in blue. And whereas Officer Mulbauer was a devoted family man whose hobbies included fishing, hunting, kayaking, biking, various other outdoor activities, and watching his son play soccer. And whereas Officer Mulbauer leaves to cherish his memory his devoted wife, Cassie Mulbauer, his 3 children, Aiden, Christian, and Mackenzie, Allison, his parents, Vern and Chris, and his siblings, Stephen Mulbauer and Lori Mulbauer. Now, therefore, it be resolved that we, the members of the Missouri House of Representatives 102nd General Assembly, join in paying final tribute to Officer Mulbauer, a dedicated law enforcement officer and remarkable gentleman of peace and kindness in this world, who will be sadly missed by all those who had the distinct privilege of knowing and working with him. And be it further resolved that the Chief Clerk of the Missouri House of Representatives be instructed to prepare a properly inscribed copy of this resolution for the family of the late officer, James Officer Mulbauer, as an expression of our deep sympathy. And I'd ask the body to pause in a moment of silence for our fallen officer.
Would everybody in the galleries and chamber please rise for a moment of silence in honor of Officer Mulbauer. Thank you. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For a final point of personal privilege, I ask you to recognize the gentleman from St. Louis City, District 78.
Gentleman from St. Louis City.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of personal privilege.
Please proceed.
Over the weekend, St. Louis City, the state, family members of Tennessee suffered a tragedy. A star Tennessee high school volleyball player lost both of her legs after a horrible car crash by an unlicensed driver who ran through a yield sign this weekend. Her name was Janae Edmondson. She was a 16-year-old volleyball player who lived in Tennessee, who came here to compete over the weekend. She was walking to her hotel Saturday around 9 p.m. after finishing her first volleyball tournament in downtown St. Louis. A car went through a yield sign and struck another car, which ultimately struck Ms. Janae. Janae was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The doctors had to amputate both of her legs. Visitors and residents alike should not feel unsafe in our city. They should not come from another state hoping to just play volleyball and win a championship, and then dreams be shattered and legs lost. I can go on and say how I'm disappointed in some of the leadership of not charging the driver a long time ago, where this incident would never happen. But more importantly, I want the family of Janae to know that so many people in St. Louis are sorry for what happened. We're sorry you came to our city and your daughter just wanted to play volleyball and now has lost both of her legs. Sorry. The body would please stand in a moment of silence for the family of Janae Edmondson. We greatly appreciate it.
Would everybody please observe a moment of silence for the lady from Tennessee? Thank you. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business will be House Bills for Perfection, House Bill 730 through House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268. We'll move to the informal calendar. I now ask you to recognize the gentleman from St. Louis for a motion on House Committee Substitute for House Bill 186.
Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I move that House Committee Substitute for House Bill 186 be committed to the Committee on Legislative Review.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has moved that House Committee Substitute to House Bill 186 be committed to the Committee on Legislative Review. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we brought this bill out of committee, and there was a lot of heartburn from our associates on the other side of the aisle. We've been trying to find a compromise to make this a bipartisan bill, and it still needs some work, so we'd like to move it over to legislative review.
Further discussion. Lady from St. Louis, Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to inquire of the previous...
Does the gentleman from St. Louis County yield?
I do.
Please proceed.
There you are. Still getting used to this sound system. Thank you for taking my inquiry, gentlemen.
Yes, ma'am.
I sit as ranking member on legislative review, and you've piqued my curiosity. Can you share with us what we were trying to accomplish when we bring it to committee?
Yeah, there's three parts to this bill. Two of them have to do with ballot language. One of those has to do with collecting signatures for IP. We don't think the IP part is ripe, so we'd like to get it removed out of the bill.
Okay, and is that the essence of what we're doing? Will we be adding more, or?
No, you will not be adding more. We will be doing a little title change to clean that up, but that would be it.
Okay, all right, go!
3 ladies. Please do not intercede the line of debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentlemen, thank you for taking my inquiry and helping to clarify things. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. Seeing none, gentleman from St. Louis County, recognized close.
I renew my motion.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has renewed his motion that House Committee Substitute House Bill 186 be committed to the Committee on Legislative Review. All those in favor will signify by saying aye, and those opposed no. And the ayes have it. House Committee Substitute House Bill 186 has been committed to the Committee on Legislative Review. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business will be House Bills for Perfection informal. I ask you to recognize the gentleman from St. Louis, District 95, for a motion on House Bill 415.
Gentleman from St. Louis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 415 be perfected and printed.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has moved that House Bill 415 be perfected and printed. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the title of House Bill 415 be agreed to.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has moved the adoption of the title to House Bill 415. Is there any discussion on the title? Seeing none, gentlemen, you're recognized to renew your motion.
I renew my motion.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has renewed his motion for the adoption of the title to House Bill 415. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. And the ayes have it. You've adopted the title. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 415 is a simple bill. All it does is require motor vehicle sales tax to be collected at the time of sale by the auto dealer. This would eliminate 90% of the temp tag abuse we see in the state. Currently, 47 of the 50 states currently do this, currently collect the sales tax at the point of sale. Auto sales taxes are the only sales tax left that is not collected at the point of sale. Some of the perks of this, if you go in to buy a vehicle, normally you do your business at the dealership and then you have to go to the Department of Revenue to pay your taxes. You will no longer have to do that. You will not have to seek out a revenue fee office in order to pay your taxes. You'll do that right at the dealership. That will also allow for the sales tax, if you're interested, if you're financing, to roll the sales tax into the financing, if you would like that. And for a lot of folks, that becomes a more reasonable proposition because writing a check for $2,000 to pay the sales tax is a lot more difficult than adding $30 to your payments every month. This is not the first step in this process. This body passed and the General Assembly passed and the governor signed legislation to create a new computer system that will soon be awarded by the Office of Administration and built by the Department of Revenue to facilitate these transactions. There's a lot of complicated details that go into that, like local sales tax, it being tied to your residence, making sure that those taxes are collected and remitted. And last but not least, the bill passed out of Ways and Means 9-0, Rules 6-0. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment ending in .01H, and I move for its adoption.
The gentleman from St. Louis has moved for the adoption of House Amendment 1 to House Bill 415. Gentleman from St. Louis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment does two things. One, and this is kind of part of the legislative process, it was found that the may being changed to a shall. We did that in one place in the bill, but it actually needed to be done in another place in statute. And so this amendment takes care of that. The other thing we've done is we've changed the date to starting January of 2024. That mostly has to do with the new computer system. The computer system isn't just about collecting the sales tax. It's also about this system will be used by law enforcement. So you enter the VIN number, and certain things will be associated with that VIN number and that license plate. Color of the vehicle, make of the vehicle, year of the vehicle, all of those sorts of things that could be used by law enforcement. And so this just allows that stuff to go into place as it becomes ready. With that, Mr. Speaker, I am happy to take any questions.
Further questions? Gentleman from St. Louis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To inquire of the bill handler.
Does the bill handler yield?
I do.
Please proceed.
Thanks, gentlemen. So,
Good morning, gentlemen.
It's funny that we've been talking about this for as many years as we have. Partially, do you know all the surrounding states, a lot of states in the United States, are we not one of the few that still do this more antiquated two-step process?
47 states already do this. So if you and I, living in the St. Louis area, we go over to Illinois to buy a vehicle, we actually have to pay the sales tax in the Illinois dealership, and then they remit it to, it gets worked out with the state of Missouri.
So when you're at a dealership, whether new, used, I understand it has to happen. How is it affected with private sales between you and I? You know, I'm going to buy...
It doesn't change anything with private sales. This is strictly through the dealership. So if you and I,
right.
You know, I sell you a car, we still have to go to the Department of Revenue. You have to go there to pay your sales tax. I have to go to get my waiver that I can then use in the purchase of a new or a different vehicle.
Great, appreciate that. The upgrade to the computer system, I know that was the stickling point, at least that's what the dealers had told us for several years. And you mentioned it in your comments. How far down the process are we to actually implementing this?
So in committee, the Office of Administration testified that this system should be awarded. So we've already taken, the RFI has been or RFP has been issued, and bids have been made. OA is going through those bids to make sure they fit the criteria, and they're telling us it should be awarded by the middle of next month.
Great. It's just, it's critical because, as you know, where you and I drive a lot back home, I'm amazed at how many people have no tags, paper tags. You know, Charlie Brennan, the well-known guy from St. Louis on the radio, he's just documented thousands of examples of this. And to the consumer's point of view, when you can't roll that one shot into your loan, it makes it unaffordable. So I think it's a good consumer protection. It's going to be good for, you know, because we all are hurt when that tax isn't collected. So
Yep. Yeah, and my harshest constituent, my wife, always comes home and calls out the date. You know, October 12th. You know, 2019. What are you doing about this? I'm like, I'm working on it.
We're working on it. I hope we get it across the finish line. Thank you for the inquiry.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Further discussion. Lady from St. Louis County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To speak to the amendment handler, bill handler.
Does the gentleman from St. Louis County yield?
I do, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One thing I just heard you say was about, I'm going to call it a portal between the dealers and DOR.
Yes, ma'am.
And you talked about how those pieces aren't quite in place yet?
Correct. So we approved the funding, the appropriation for this new computer system. The dealers have been paying into this system as well because they want it and they want to be able to do this like other dealers do. So it's not quite ready for prime time, but it's,
well,
like I said,
I'm
always
a little
telling us.
intrigued because I've been following this issue for a couple of years and was disappointed that we increased dealers' ability to charge a fee on new car purchases, and I think we're getting ready to do that again. So it was around $200. They can charge up to $500, and then because we haven't, as a body, as a building, put money to upgrade our computers for however many years we've probably had computers, that the concern that we didn't have a portal that was open. So we increased that fee so we could have better computer systems, but there's already a portal open from dealerships to DOR to collect a portion of that fee. So my concern is, why isn't there a portal? Why can't that same portal be used to collect the sales tax on these cars?
Yeah, lady, I don't have an answer to that.
Well,
I'm not quite sure.
It's
Maybe
confusing and it's complex, and I'm intrigued why, if we're collecting the portion of the fee, the administrative fee that they're selling cars with, if we're collecting that already, why can't that same portal be used to collect the sales tax on these cars? So I wish we could have a better answer. I don't understand why that isn't available to us right now. If we're already collecting one fee from dealers, why can't we collect another fee from them? So I support your bill. I appreciate it. I'm not necessarily happy with the shall versus may, but I understand you're just keeping it consistent throughout the entire bill.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. Thank you,
lady.
Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. Gentleman from Washington.
To inquire the sponsor, Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker.
from St. Louis County, yield.
I do.
Please proceed.
Good morning,
Morning,
gentlemen. Hey, a couple of things. What was the amount? I know when it came through committee, they had projected an amount of sales tax that we're probably losing because of individuals not licensing their vehicles. What was that amount?
So the estimates I've seen range from $40 to $80 million.
Yeah, so it is significant. And then one other question. Now you won't totally eliminate your trip to the license bureau. You'll still have to go there to get your plates. I mean, even though you can pay the sales tax at the...
Actually, gentlemen, it does eliminate that trip. What will happen is the way the process will work is you'll go into the dealership, you'll do all of your paperwork, you will leave with the temp tag, but that will start the ball rolling for DOR to issue your plates, and you'll receive them in the mail. So that the temp tag that you're issued will correspond with what DOR thinks it will take them to get those plates to you. They're already delivering license plates in the mail.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good bill, and I urge the body to support it. Speak on the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, gentlemen.
This came through the Ways and Means. It had no opposition, so I think it does provide a convenience for taxpayers who are purchasing vehicles in order to take care of this all at the auto dealership. So I urge the body to support it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. Lady from St. Louis.
To inquire of the bill handler.
Gentleman, yield.
I do.
Please proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning, lady. Happy birthday, belated one day.
Thank you. I want to thank you for bringing this bill this far. And the reason
You've
I say
worked on
that,
this for quite some time. Thank you for that.
my freshman year here, that was my first thing I was trying to do. So it's a lot of legwork to figure out how it got this discombobulated. But I do want people to know the reason we can't use that same portal is because we can't get clean titles. So if you're buying a brand new car, that portal is fine. But if you're buying a used car and you're trying to clear the title, that's an issue. And it was also an issue in the way of they bring cars to the state of Missouri to do what's called whitewash. So if there's a big disaster in another state, hurricane, flood, those cars end up in Missouri, and by the time they get the title, clear title on it, it's already gone. So I'm glad that will solve that.
Thank you,
I look forward to my constituents will be very happy. So thank you very much for carrying this.
Thank you, lady. Thank you for the inquiry.
Further discussion. Gentleman from St. Louis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to inquire of the gentleman or the bill handler.
Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Please proceed.
Hey, gentlemen. How you doing?
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm good. Thank you.
Good. So thank you for the bill. I think that it's a good step, but I think that it's incremental, like many of the steps that we take in this building. I think that it's quite a few other measures that can be taken that take a bigger chunk out of the apple, if you will, because I don't know that this solves the problem of folks driving around with temporary tags that are already doing it.
It does
now
not.
It stops the problem going forward.
You're exactly right. This is strictly about going forward.
All the bad actors that are already out there are still going to be out there, right?
Yes, sir.
So I think that if we're thinking about really getting down to the root of the issue or really getting rid of the issue, not necessarily the root, but if we're talking about getting rid of the issue, we may need to think about thinking about it. I thought about this a little bit, and I think that people fall in two different buckets when they think about licensing. You either fall in this is an income generating measure, or you fall in this is a safety measure bucket. Now, there's some in between, and some folks say that they value one more than the other. But I think that if you're looking at it from a strictly safety issue point of view, so if you're thinking about officers need to know what car they're walking up to after they pull a car over, or bystanders need to know what car just hit someone or committed a bad act rather than having to squinch their eyes and look at a paper tag or maybe even a tag that's not even there. And then you got the folks that are like, well, I paid my license fees, so I think that other folks should pay theirs, or how's the state ever going to come up with any money if we don't charge folks minuscule in the grand scheme of things, amount of money for the vehicle tax. So I think that as a body, we should look at how we take a bigger chunk out of that apple so that we don't have the outrageous amount of folks that we have now riding through it.
I agree with you completely, and this bill looks forward, but I think this body would be very interested in ways to get rid of some of the stuff that's currently out there, and we've talked about some of that. I've left it off of here just to kind of get this through, but we've talked about everything from increased penalties to requiring law enforcement to pull those over or whatever. But we just wanted to kind of get the forward piece, but certainly happy to work on the backward looking piece.
Yeah. Like I said, I thank you for bringing this forward because I think that any step forward is a good step forward. I would prefer that it be a bigger step forward, but step forward nonetheless. So I'll put something on folks' minds. If you fall strictly in that safety bucket, right, I think that a good place to start is that anybody that has expired or paper tags that are no longer valid, they get an exemption period similar to the tax-free weekend for clothing and different supplies like that, to where if you're a good actor and you really just can't afford it and you need to get your tags, hey, we'll give you your tags and you can sign some kind of agreement that says that you'll give us X percentage of the amount that you owe, and we'll give you these tags so that we can know who the real bad actors are, so that police can pull over the folks that are bad actors and are keeping paper tags so that folks can't see what their tag is. We can actually get down to those folks rather than pulling over grandma that just can't afford her tags. So thank you for the inquiry, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion? Seeing none, gentlemen from St. Louis County, you're recognized. Closed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has renewed his motion for the adoption of House Amendment 1 to House Bill 415. All those in favor will signify by saying aye, and those opposed no. And the ayes have it. You've adopted House Amendment 1 to House Bill 415. Further discussion? Seeing none, gentleman from St. Louis County, you recognize. Closed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has renewed his motion for the perfection and printing of House Bill 415 as amended. All those in favor will signify by saying aye, and those opposed no. And the ayes have it. You've perfected and printed House Bill 415 as amended. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Staying on House Bills for Perfection Informal, I now ask you to recognize the gentleman from Green, District 134, for a motion on House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268.
Gentleman from Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 268 be perfected and printed.
The gentleman from Green has moved for the perfection and printing of House Bill 268. Gentleman from Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268 be adopted.
The gentleman from Green has moved for the adoption of House Committee Substitute to House Bill 268. Gentleman from Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the title of House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268 be agreed to.
The gentleman from Green has moved for the adoption of the title, the House Committee Substitute to House Bill 268. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the title will signify by saying aye, and those opposed no. And the ayes have it. You've adopted the title. Gentleman from Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 268 establishes the Regulatory Sandbox Act in the state of Missouri. The impetus behind this bill is the extremely high regulatory burden that is imposed on the people in our state, specifically our small businesses. There was a recent study back in 2017 that showed over 113,000 regulations imposed by the state of Missouri on our citizens. That doesn't even take into account the regulations imposed by our counties, our cities, and certainly doesn't account for the likely hundreds of thousands, if not more, imposed by the federal government. House Bill 268 establishes an alternative mechanism for innovators, entrepreneurs, people that want to bring new products or services to market outside of the normal regulatory framework that is currently in place. The way that it works is it creates a regulatory relief office within the Department of Economic Development. If you have an innovator, an entrepreneur, someone that's trying to test out a new product or service, they can then submit an application to this regulatory relief office to have their product or service go into the regulatory sandbox where your normal rules would not apply in the same way that they typically do. As part of that application, your innovator has to identify which rules they're asking to be temporarily waived for the period of time that they would be in the sandbox. This isn't something where you're just waiving all rules for anything that goes into the sandbox. It's specific rules that the entrepreneur is asking to be waived. Once it goes to that regulatory relief office, it being the application, the regulatory relief office then looks at it and then determines which of the agencies within the state would have jurisdiction over that rule or over that service or product that is seeking to go into the sandbox. If an agency approves the application, if the agency gives its okay and says, yeah, we think that it would make sense to waive the rule for a period of time, then the application goes on to another layer of protection, and that's this advisory committee. The advisory committee is composed of a number of individuals, and you can find them in the bill text itself. There's 8 individuals. And the idea is we're creating a bipartisan committee to make sure that this is something that would have broad bipartisan buy-in. So the folks on the committee are the Department of Economic Development Director, his or her designee, Department of Commerce and Insurance, his or her designee, the Attorney General or his or her designee, a member of Higher Ed, and then 2 members of the House of Representatives, one to be appointed by the Speaker, one to be appointed by the Minority Leader, 2 members of the Senate, one to be appointed by the President Pro Tem of the Senate, and one to be appointed by the Minority Leader. So then if those people also agree that this product or service can enter the sandbox and have the regulations waived for a time, they would then send a recommendation to the Regulatory Relief Office to accept the application. Stepping back one level, if any department sees this as a problem, if they get an application and say, we don't think that we are comfortable waiving this rule, waiving this regulation for this particular applicant, then that kills the application right there. So there are a lot of checks and balances in place to make sure that public safety is still being accounted for, consumer protections are still in place. And then once a applicant goes into the sandbox and they start to test their product or service in the market, if there somehow gets to be a bad actor that gets in through this very vigorous application process, there's a mechanism in place for that bad actor to get kicked out right away. There are a number of other things that this Regulatory Relief Office can also do while it's administering the sandbox program. One thing that it will do is review other rules and regulations that are already on the books, and that way they can make recommendations to us about things that they think are outdated or need to be removed. That office, of course, can't do anything by itself, but they can send recommendations to us, since I know a lot of us in the legislature on both sides of the aisle have interest in removing certain rules that we find to be overly burdensome. That's one function that the office can do. They also will be administering kind of a portal for the general public to make similar recommendations. I think there are a few benefits to this legislation. One of them, obviously, is that it sends a clear message across the country that Missouri is open for business. We are open for innovation. We are doing cool, new, innovative things. We would be the third state in the country, should we adopt this legislation, that would have a regulatory sandbox that's open across all industries. There are only 2 other states right now that have something similar in place. One is the state of Utah. They did the first one a few years ago. And then the second one was the state of Arizona, which adopted a full one last year. There are a number of states, and this isn't a red state, blue state thing. This is more of an innovative state versus not innovative state thing, that have limited sandboxes for certain fields. So, for example, you have a lot of regulatory sandboxes around the state for financial technology. You have Nevada, Florida, New York, North Carolina, Wyoming, West Virginia. You have some states that have it for blockchain technologies. Hawaii was one of those. You have some for insurance only, which would be Kentucky, Vermont, West Virginia, South Dakota. And then you have others that have it for legal services only, like California, for example. Another benefit is that it allows the regulators to watch these new products and services as they're being developed and hopefully craft regulations that make sense. Instead of trying to fit a square peg in a round hole like so often happens, they can actually watch these product services as they're developed and hopefully create regulations that are more narrowly tailored to accomplish the objectives of what the regulators are trying to do. With that, I'll go ahead and close and open myself up for any questions.
Discussion on House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268. Gentleman from Jackson.
To inquire the bill's sponsor, Mr. Speaker.
Does the gentleman from Green yield?
I do.
Proceed.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Hey, I think this is the first time that I've inquired you on the floor.
I think that's probably right.
Yeah. Well, I don't do this that often, so...
It's an exciting day for me.
It is. Me also. We just had the Chiefs Super Bowl parade, and I'm really feeling good about things.
Amen to that.
Yeah, I have a couple questions about this bill. It came through economic development, and I believe it was 16-0 when it came out. Do you recall?
Yeah, that's correct. I appreciate you bringing that up. So it came out of economic development both this year and last year unanimously, and also came out of rules both this year and last year without any no votes as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate the effort and the time that you put into this bill. It has changed tremendously from last year. For example, I didn't hear you mention the governor's appointing anyone.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the changes from last year to this year, and visiting with a number of stakeholders, is the governor previously had a bunch of appointments he had to make to the advisory committee. Sounded like no one, including the governor's office, was super excited about the number of appointments that the governor had to make. Plus, the executive branch is already pretty well represented on that advisory committee with the department directors. So we removed that.
Yes, and also you lowered the fees for getting into the sandbox.
Yeah, that's right. So that was one of the things that we worked on last year. There were a number of concerns with the high level of the fee. We reduced that quite a bit to make sure that the fee would not be cost prohibitive for anyone that wanted to go in, but there's at least a little bit of a fee to make sure that you don't have frivolous applications being filed.
Great. And last but not least, there was some time frame that was changed also in the bill to try to accommodate the committee.
Yeah.
Could you speak on that?
Yeah, that's right. So one of the concerns that have been raised by folks on both sides of the aisle, as well as some outside groups, I think the Sierra Club may have been one, was that it was a very quick time frame that was required. And we want to have a quick time frame in place to make sure that this is still moving forward with innovation. Time is of the essence. But we also wanted to make sure that we weren't putting too big of a burden on these various groups that need time to review things and make sure that that their recommendations are based on sound facts and data. So that was one of the things that worked on with a lot of the folks on your side of the aisle to get that done.
Great, and really do appreciate that. And you mentioned in your opening there about the committee. What is it? Oversight committee, or just what's called it? What is that committee called?
the advisory committee.
The advisory committee. And you mentioned a lot of people that's going to be on that committee. As a matter of fact, the speaker gets to nominate a couple of people. The Senate gets to nominate a couple of people, and then from various departments throughout the state of Missouri get to participate in this. Now, I didn't see anyone on there from the environment that's representing on this advisory committee.
Yeah, no, there's not someone that's specifically from the environment, though I think you would have a lot of people who would be on that committee who would certainly take those considerations into account. You know, we've got at least 2 members of the minority party who would be represented on the advisory committee, so assuming that, you know, the current political structure in place stays more or less the same for a little while, you would have folks that I think would be highly interested in environmental concerns, that their voices would be represented on that advisory committee. I think if you have issues that are going to affect the environment, you're going to have your various departments that have oversight of those issues that also have to give the okay. So, for example, if you have something that's going to have environmental impacts, you know, Department of Natural Resources is most likely going to be involved, and I would imagine they're going to be very focused on making sure that no one gets in that's going to harm the environment. So I think we have a lot of good protections in place to make sure that environmental concerns, consumer protection, those types of things are well covered under the current language.
Well, I really appreciate the inquiry, and thank you for the hard work you put into the bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative.
Gentlemen?
Just like to continue to speak on the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Proceed, gentlemen.
Mr. Speaker, as you heard there at the end that we talked about environment, and doesn't look like the bill has the environment portion covered on there. So therefore, I have an amendment ending in 01H. It's been distributed, and I move for its adoption.
The gentleman from Jackson has moved for the adoption of House Amendment 1. Gentleman from Jackson.
Mr. Speaker, this amendment is real simple. It adds the environmental portion in there. It's several sentences where we want to insert the environment so that they would be covered, and therefore this would make this bill a whole lot better. And if there's any questions, I'm opening myself up for questions.
Discussion on House Amendment 1. Gentleman from Green.
Speak briefly on the amendment.
Proceed, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the gentleman coming to me beforehand, about an hour or so before session today, to let me know he was going to be offering this amendment. I've looked at this language. I've seen it a few times. This is language that is from the Sierra Club. I've tried to take a number of their recommendations and have included them in the bill in the past, and it's now some of that language you heard us discuss just moments ago. So that we've taken a lot of those considerations into account already. We have a number of protections in place already that would ensure we're not going to have environmental bad actors getting into the sandbox. So while I appreciate the intent of the language, I frankly don't think it's necessary. I think the language that we already have in place is solid to address these concerns. And I also don't want to do anything which may unintentionally make it even harder for applicants to get into the regulatory sandbox. It's already incredibly challenging to get in as it is, and I think there could be some things here that could make it even tougher. But again, I think we've successfully accomplished what the language here sets out to do, which is to provide enhanced environmental protections. I think we're already there. So for that reason, I would ask the body to vote this amendment down respectfully to the representative.
Further discussion on House Amendment 1. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To inquire of the amendment maker, please.
Does the gentleman from Jackson yield?
Yes.
Proceed.
Good day, gentlemen. How are you?
Good morning.
This is a pretty simple amendment, actually.
It is. Really, it is.
So your concern here, I just want to understand that. In the framework of this bigger bill, is to specifically line out environmental impacts, correct?
Absolutely.
And so, you know, I know folks in St. Charles County right now are pretty familiar with the implications of environmental impacts. I know that folks out in the Raytown area are pretty much thinking about environmental impacts with what we do. You know, we have to take concern of not only what happens this week, but when we leave something sitting on the ground, what's that going to look like for our grandkids?
Yes.
And groundwater contamination, soil contamination, and you know, I got nothing against business, and business's job is to do what? Make a profit.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and we don't want them making a profit at our expense.
And so I'm listening to the gentleman who's carrying the bill's comments about your amendment, and I'm looking at your amendment, and I'm thinking, who could possibly have an issue with making sure that we can breathe the air and drink the water when we're doing experiments with regulations in the sandbox?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, accidents happen already, and why should we go out and leave something unattended like this by not putting this in this regulation so that everyone would know and feel a little more safer?
Okay, so your intention here is just to make sure our bases are covered moving forward, right?
Absolutely, trying to protect the public.
All right, I appreciate you, gentlemen. I appreciate your amendment. Is there anything that you think you need to tell me about it right now?
Well, I just, you know, I would just like the body to vote yes on the amendment.
Well, I appreciate that. You're good at reminding us of that. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Further discussion on House Amendment 1. Lady from St. Louis County.
Thank you. To speak on the amendment.
Proceed, lady.
I want to speak in favor of this amendment. As I think about the metaphor of a sandbox, if you were to go to Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart or wherever and buy a sand table for your child or grandchild, what do they come with nowadays? They come with a top, because there are environmental hazards to a sandbox. And if any of you have ever had kids who have played in a sandbox, you know that you don't want the neighborhood animals getting into that sandbox because there's an environmental hazard to that. Well, it's a metaphor, but we're talking about a sandbox. And folks, if we decide to suspend financial kinds of regulations, if we decide to suspend all kinds of regulations, it doesn't make much difference. But if we suspend environmental regulations, it can have a very long-term effect. And so we need to think about that very seriously. I would be in favor of this bill if there were additional safeguards. Our children are important, our grandkids are important, and frankly, our constituents are important. And we know the kinds of problems we've had in Missouri with long-term issues of all kinds of toxins leaching into our environment. So let's think about the well-being of the people, which is our motto, and let's vote in favor of this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment, lady from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To inquire of the amendment maker.
Does the gentleman from Jackson yield?
Yes.
Proceed.
Oh, there you are.
How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Feeling good today.
Not bad. So I was wondering if you could briefly kind of go over your amendment, what it does to help the environment, and to perhaps make this bill just a little bit better.
Well, in this bill, it talks about the consumer. It just really doesn't mention the environment. And what we would like to do and see is that it mentioned the environment in here. Not only does it mention the consumers and this and that, we wanted to say consumer and the environment. And so there's several changes throughout the bill that we would like to insert the environment, which will make the bill a lot safer for the public. So that's just a brief overall view of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Mr. Speaker, can I inquire of the bill sponsor?
Does the gentleman from Green yield, and do you have a clear path?
Yes, I do.
Proceed.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, doing well. How are you?
Not too bad. So we voted this out of committee.
We did.
Nobody voted no. And, last session, I did vote against this bill.
Mm-hmm.
And I commend you for working across the aisle, working on the issues that a lot of people addressed and had, and really trying to come to the table to this, to make it bipartisan. So thank you for that. Now, with this amendment, I feel like it just gives that extra kind of cushion, per se, to make this bill just a little bit better, so there's not a lot of concerns or unintended consequences that might occur. I mean, are you still not willing to, and I know that you have given Sierra Club a lot, and thank you for that, and I know that, yes, these kind of came a little bit late, but at the same time, I feel like, if we want to really make this bill better, I would feel more comfortable with these added amendments.
Yeah, and I appreciate that and understand it. I think for today, my concerns remain. This bill is going to go over to the Senate, assuming we pass it out of here, and there will likely be continued changes to be made to it. I'm not closing off the conversation completely. Again, I don't really think it's necessary because of all the other protections we have already in place. And there are some changes in here that are a little bit new that we actually haven't talked about all that much, and I haven't had a chance to really dive into it to see how they impact the overall bill. But there's some changes discussing the innovative offering and definitions about what that is. So that causes me a little bit of concern. Also, it's not just including some words about environmental protection. There's some additional definitional type changes it looks like to me that I just haven't had a chance to really dive in and see how it impacts the overall bill. So there's really a couple of things that give me pause to say, yeah, I'm good to go with this today. But I mean, as you know, and I think a lot of the folks on the minority side of the aisle know, I've been willing to talk to anybody and everybody to address concerns, try and make this bill as good as I can, as bipartisan as I can, and I'm certainly willing to continue looking at that. But for today, there's a few things in here that just give me some pause, and for that reason, I'm opposed to the amendment today.
Okay, and thank you so much for not closing off the conversations, but as of now, if this amendment doesn't really get on it, I'm not 100% sure where I stand with this bill. So thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Speak against the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Proceed, gentlemen.
Thank you. I get to speak against this amendment. I sit as a vice chair on the committee this went through, and I think the representative from Greene County put together a great bill, and like he said, there's plenty of protection for the consumer, for the consumers in this bill. I think the bill is good as is, and I would appreciate all of you to support the bill, but vote against this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion on House Amendment 1. Seeing none. Gentleman from Jackson, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, there's no doubt the gentleman has worked diligently and hard with this committee. And he has a bill that could be made better by this amendment. And there's nothing wrong with trying to protect this environment because we live in it every day. Our kids will get to live here. So I think the more protection we have, well, you just can't have enough protection. So I urge the body to vote this amendment in. Vote yes. Thank you.
The gentleman from Jackson has renewed his motion for the adoption of House Amendment 1. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. All those opposed will say no. The noes have it. You failed to adopt House Amendment 1. Further discussion on House Committee substitute for House Bill 268. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
To speak on the bill.
Proceed, gentlemen.
We all know what this is going to do. We all know exactly what this bill is going to do. Less regulations, less accountability, less transparency, more bad things for the environment. That's exactly what this does. It's to let people go around the system. Let them not play by the rules for a little bit, and then we'll see how it goes. We'll figure it out later and just hope for the best. We have laws. We have rules. We have ordinances. When you open up a business, you got to follow them. That's how it works. If one of y'all don't like one of the regulations or one of the rules, let's talk about it. Let's change that specific law or regulation. I'm willing to have that debate. Tell me which one you don't like. Here's some quotes from the committee hearing that I heard. I think the first one in the U.S. was 2017. So the first sandbox ever in the United States of America was just 5 years ago, Mr. Speaker. That's how much we know if this is going to work or not. 5 years ago. And you know what it was created for? It was created for tech issues and finance companies. That's what they were doing in Utah. And now we're taking their idea in Utah that was supposed to be about tech, and we're bringing it to Missouri and morphing it into this crazy thing that is all departments, all issues, agriculture, the environment, Department of Natural Resources. That was never the intent of that original law that they keep talking about. 5 years. Here's another quote, just to prove what I just said. A couple examples I want to give. One from Arizona was a company that created an algorithm for evaluating renewable energy products, Brightfi. Brightfi services tested an iPhone banking app. Another one was to provide more accountable bank accounts for people that didn't have traditional banking accounts in Utah. Nothing about DNR and the environment. Here's another quote. Really listen to this one. This is a different approach to oversight. This is a different approach to oversight. And he also talks about public health and safety and the risk to the environment there. Somebody else asked a question. Could someone from out of state use these laws and then go back to their home state? Is there anything in this bill that would keep them from doing that? The bill sponsor responded, I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on the bill. And the person that asked that question said, I wouldn't think harmful, unnecessary, but lost revenue if they take advantage of Missouri programs and then take their business back to where they came from, that might not benefit us in the long term. Another reason I think this is a bad idea, now this is not quotes from the committee, Mr. Speaker, this is just me speaking. Another reason why I think this is a bad idea is because it is meant for innovative businesses. Now, that term is completely subjective, but let's just say it's a brand new innovative business. Wouldn't that be the kind of business, depending on what kind of manufacturing they're doing, that we would want to have great oversight on? A brand new innovative technology, wouldn't we want oversight on that? As opposed to letting them just test it out for 7 years? I have this question. If we knowingly deregulate things that end up causing people harm, and we know that because we're deregulating them, and there's a good chance that people could get very sick and possibly die, could the state of Missouri be held responsible? I don't know. But if we willingly and knowingly make a law to have less regulations that we know would result in people getting sick, and God only knows what, Could we be held liable for that? You know, I look at this as something that actually affects rural Missouri and rural Missourians more than folks in my district, in St. Louis County and St. Louis City. Because St. Louis County and St. Louis City, probably Kansas City, we have ordinances. You can't do crazy things in our county. But y'all don't have those in rural Missouri. What was it last week? I was in a committee hearing regarding mining in St. Genevieve County. This company came in, tried to just do it under the table without letting the community members know. DNR signed off on it. And then later said, oh, hold on a second. Actually, you know what? We're going to take that mining permit back. After the people started talking. And that room was full. The entire room was full, including people standing outside in the hallway. Right? People in rural Missouri concerned about their groundwater, air pollution, the water in their wells, the health of their children. That's what I think this is going to affect the most. This is bad policy. You are making rules for some and not for others. You're letting another government you're creating another government agency, by the way, choose who's going to have to follow the rules and who's not going to have to follow the rules. Up to 7 years. That's what this bill does. So some companies will have to adhere to rules, regulations, the laws, all the things that we do to keep people safe, and then other companies won't have to. If you are someone that believes in capitalism and the free market, you are messing with capitalism and the free market by creating a government agency to overlook this. That's exactly what you're doing. You're picking winners and losers. If you do not like a law or regulation, pass a law to change it. Let's talk about it. Because I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure there are regulations that go too far that we need to change, and by golly, I want to change them. This is a terrible bill. I don't think people realize how terrible this bill is. Please vote no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion, lady from right.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To speak in support of the bill.
Proceed, lady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am from rural Missouri, and I know that for 7 years, my constituents have sent me up here to vote to grow rural Missouri through efforts just like this. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask the body to join me in voting yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion, seeing none. Gentleman from Green, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
The gentleman from Green has renewed his motion for the adoption of House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. All those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. You've adopted House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268. Gentleman from Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
The gentleman from Green has renewed his motion for the perfection and printing of House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. All those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. You've perfected and printed House Committee Substitute for House Bill 268. Gentleman from Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The next order of business will be announcements.
Announcements. Gentleman from Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of special guests.
Proceed, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This afternoon in the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, we'll be hearing a bill on Memorial Highway dedicated to Officer Blaze Madrid Evans. His parents are present today, and Mr. Speaker, to my right, your left, in between the fifth and sixth columns, is Sharon Braley, Shannon Evans, and Detective Ron Balzer. I would ask that the body recognize them. Thank you.
Welcome to the House. Further announcements. Lady from Boone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As everyone knows, last night was our second annual trivia night. The monies raised, which Representative Kelly will announce the final total later, but we want to give her a big thanks, and Representative Bangert. So Will Rogers said, if you done it, it ain't bragging. So I want my team members, we are the second annual winners 2 years in a row. Our team name was the Champs. And I got to tell you, we had about 20 plus teams. We were neck and neck. And a shout out to my team members. It's not what you know, it's who you surround yourself with that know the answers. And we are the winners. Thank you.
Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the J House Social Club will meet tonight at 8 o'clock.
Further announcements. Gentleman from Cass.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Kansas City caucus that works with the Kansas City Chamber, the Republican side, we are going to have a short 5-minute meeting right in the side gallery.
Lady from District 67.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to recognize special guests.
Proceed, lady.
Thank you so much. I know that we previously mentioned the great leadership of the HBCU of Harris-Stowe State University with Dr. Collins. Dr. Collins is here with us, but we also wanted to take the time to recognize a few of the students, the amazing students that have come to visit the Capitol today. I do want to recognize Miss Kiera Isaac. She is the 18th Mrs. Harris-Stowe State University, so we wanted to recognize her. And the students to join her are Jalen Jordan, Teviana Harris, Jalen Johnson, Cameron Lowry, Michaela Marshall, Desmond, which is one of my constituents, Evans, Adriana Smith, and Danny Young. Would this body please join me in welcoming them today? Thank you.
Gentleman from St. Charles.
Special announcement, Mr. Speaker.
Proceed, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wanted to let the body be aware that today is a special birthday for the gentleman from Clay County, District 8, Hurlburt District. If you could all join me in wishing the gentleman a happy 37th birthday.
Happy birthday, gentlemen. Gentleman from Jackson.
Announcement.
Proceed, gentlemen.
Your special committee on election contests will meet at 12 noon in hearing room 5.
Gentleman from Jasper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee on utilities will meet in hearing room 1 at 12 o'clock.
Gentleman from St. Joe.
Announcement, Mr. Speaker, from a microphone not my own.
Proceed, gentlemen.
Your new caucus, the Chippendale Dancers, will be meeting immediately after session.
Lady from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not even sure how to go after that. Announcement, please.
Proceed, lady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Transportation Infrastructure will meet in hearing room 117 at noon. And then thereafter, we will have a joint meeting with the Transportation Accountability Committee, also in hearing room 117. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further announcements? Seeing none. Gentleman from Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members should be prepared to debate House Committee substitute on House Bills 994, 52, and 984. And with no further business before this body, I move the House stand in recess until 2 p.m. this day.
The gentleman from Scott has moved that the House stand in recess until 2 p.m. this day. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. All those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. The House stands in recess.